Hello, historians. If you clicked on this link, that means you are interested in learning a little bit more about Galileo Galilei. So here is the slide that you saw in your previous presentation. Oopsies. You get his job, when he was born and died, what he was best known for. And here is a portrait of Galileo, and you can see that in his hand, he's actually holding a telescope. So Galileo Galilei, who is generally only known by his first name, Galileo, was born in Pisa, Italy, on February 15th, 1564. His family belonged to nobility, but they were not rich. His father sent him to study medicine at the local university. Galileo, however, soon turned to a career in science. In 1583, Galileo discovered the law of the pendulum by watching a chandelier swing in the cathedral at Pisa. He timed it with his pulse, and he found that, whether it swung in a wide or narrow arc, it always took the same amount of time to complete an oscillation. And an oscillation is just one full circle. So it always took the same amount of time, no matter if it's swinging in a wide arc or in a narrow arc, it always takes the same amount of time to complete that circle. He thus gave society the first reliable means of keeping time. A lecture on geometry kindled his interest in mathematics, and he got his father's permission to change his studies. Lack of money forced him to leave school in 1585, and he became a lecturer at the Academy of Florence. The next year, he attracted attention with discoveries in hydrostatics. His work in dynamics won him an appointment as lecturer on mathematics at the University of Pisa in 1589. He soon made enemies with his arguments against what he considered mistakes in the science of the day. According to a popular story, he dropped weights from the Leaning Tower of Pisa to prove his views concerning falling bodies, aka proving that gravity exists. His writings, however, do not mention such an experiment. In any case, resentment against his views drove him out of Pisa in 1591. In 1592, the University of Padua offered Galileo a professorship in mathematics. About 1609, after word from Holland of Hans Lippershey's newly invented telescope reached him, he built his own version of the instrument. He developed its magnifying power until on January 7th, 1610, he saw the four moons of Jupiter. He also saw the mountains and craters of the moon and found the Milky Way to be a dense collection of stars. Galileo moved to Florence in September 1610 and was a philosopher and mathematician there for many years. In 1609, Johannes Kepler published his laws of planetary motion based on the Copernican theory. The Copernican theory is that the planets revolve around the sun. Previously, everyone believed that the sun revolved around the earth. Galileo supported this view strongly. And in 1616, he received a formal warning that the theory was contrary to the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church. Nevertheless, he again supported the Copernican view in a dialogue, The Great Systems of the Universe. During his last 8 years of life, Galileo lived in Florence under house arrest for having held and taught Copernican doctrine. He became blind in 1637, but continued to work until his death on January 8, 1642. Nearly 342 years later, Galileo was pardoned by Pope John Paul II, and the Church finally accepted his teachings. Galileo's contributions to mechanics include the law of falling bodies, the fact that the path of a projectile is a parabola, and the principle of flotation. He also made a simple thermometer. Galileo's great contribution to scientific thinking was the principle of inertia. And I know what you're saying, Miss Smith. We are not in Miss Kowalski's class. We are not talking about any of this in social studies. So I gave you a quick cheat sheet of all of his theories. So our first one is the law of a pendulum. And that basically means if you drop a heavy object attached to a string, the object will not swing up higher than from where it was dropped from. His law of falling bodies, which means if you drop two things from the same height, No matter if one is heavier than the other, they will both hit the ground at the same time. A telescope, we already talked about a little bit. He didn't invent it, but it is an invention that lets you see things very, very far away. And Galileo made it so he could see things even further away. The Copernican theory is that the Earth rotates around the sun, not the other way around. The path of a projectile is a parabola. That means if you throw something far away from you, it will always fly in the shape of a half circle on its way down. So if I toss something, it's not just going to fly in a straight line until it just drops to the ground. It's going to gently arc like that. And finally, the principle of inertia. So that means when an object is still, it will not move unless someone moves it. And while an object is in motion, it will not stop unless an outside force stops it. And the outside force that stops most things is friction. And friction is when you rub things together. So you can see if you rub your hands together, they get warm. That's because of the friction. So friction slows down everything. It's the reason why if you roll a ball, it won't just keep rolling, the ball stops. And so that is the principle of inertia, is that an object in motion will remain in motion until an outside source stops it. And so here are some of Galileo's overall achievements. We saw this in the previous presentation. And you are done with your notes, historians. You can go ahead and use the other links on the article to research Galileo.